Hello everyone, here we go again. This is what else I saw in August that I didn't already tell you about, and as you can see by the title, we've got a lot of movies to cover today, so buckle up. Movie number one is something I'd seen before, 2011's Super 8. Set in 1979, a group of kids trying to film a zombie movie late at night witness a freight train explosion. The Air Force's sketchy cleanup efforts, combined with strange occurrences in the area, caused the kids to wonder just what sort of cargo the train was carrying. I first saw Super 8 not long after it came out, and the impression that stuck with me then is that I liked it, but the last act was a dissatisfying conclusion. I'm not sure how I got there, because I didn't have that opinion the second time around. In general, I liked the movie better this time. The kids are relatively likable, sci-fi horror movie geeks who are actually doing an impressive job with their home video. They have some funny dialogue, and the breakout here is Elle Fanning, who a decade later has come into her own. The main character is a quiet boy mourning the loss of his mom and struggling to connect with his stern deputy sheriff dad. Oddly enough, that dad is played by Kyle Chandler, who went on to play a similar role, kind of similar, in the legendary Godzilla movies. This was produced by Steven Spielberg and directed by J.J. Abrams, and in terms of subject matter, perspective, and sentimentality, it's an obvious Spielberg homage. Think E.T. and Close Encounters. And I guess Abrams did the teen 80s nostalgia fest before it was cool. Well, this is 79, but that's close enough. I think it's a fairly well-made movie when it comes to acting, storytelling, and pacing. The creature design is pretty good too, though you see precious little of it. What knocks it back a peg is that Super 8 is a lens flare smorgasbord. Ugh. Now, if you don't know what a lens flare is, you might not notice it, and more power to you. But if you do know, and you know that J.J. Abrams has a peculiar obsession with them, it'll drive you crazy. The lens flares are excessive in this movie, particularly in explosion sequences, but really throughout the whole film, to the point that I said, enough already! Still, that stylistic choice doesn't make it a bad movie, and I enjoyed it more than I had before. I also got a big kick out of the end credits, the movie after the movie. Movie number two is 1955's The Sea Chase, a World War II film directed by John Farrow, in which John Wayne plays the captain of an old German freighter that's at port in Australia when word comes through that war is imminent. Despite his dislike of the Nazi Party and his no longer being a member of the German Navy, the captain sneaks his ship and crew out of the harbor to escape internment. But the British Navy jumps on their trail, relentlessly tracking them around the Pacific. Yes, the casting of John Wayne as a German sea captain seems an odd choice, and no, he doesn't do the accent, but the character's personality does suit the type of roles he often played, so in a way, it makes sense. And as far as the accent goes, none of the American actors here affect an accent. It's one of those things where you just got to assume that they're all speaking German, or use your imagination. Lana Turner co-stars, and she is exceedingly glamorous as a woman the German consul forces Wayne to take with him. Of course, that causes all kinds of drama on the ship. And David Farrar plays Wayne's British friend and Turner's ex, who's in hot pursuit. I had low expectations for this one, but it turned out to be pretty good. More sea adventure than war movie, with the Germans straining to keep the ship going and improve their chance of survival. Lana Turner does look a little too clean and well-coiffed, despite being at sea for weeks. I kept wondering how on earth she was setting her hair, but she's well cast as a wartime femme fatale who softens up on the voyage, and she has rather good chemistry with Wayne. Movie number three is 1996's Courage Under Fire. Denzel Washington plays an army colonel returned from Desert Storm and struggling with haunting memories, who is tasked with finding out if a female captain, a medevac pilot, is eligible for a posthumous Medal of Honor. It's got an impressive cast of stars and character actors, fledgling Matt Damon, Lou Diamond Phillips, Scott Glenn, Michael Moriarty, to name a few, and Meg Ryan plays the officer in question. She really startled me by pulling out a guttural Texas drawl. It's a really good movie with a score by James Horner. Intense and loud action scenes are well balanced with emotional conflict. I really liked Denzel Washington's character's wife, played by Regina Taylor. She's a sensitive but firm woman who knows her husband well, can see he's going through something, gives him space when he needs it, chatter when he needs it, but also makes it clear when a certain behavior needs to change. Great secondary storyline there. In its examination of topics like heroism, bravery, and the truth, events are recalled, probed, and analyzed from every angle. We see some events play out multiple ways according to the conflicting claims and revelations of eyewitness reports. So essentially, this is a Rashomon movie. Movie number 4 is 1950's influential Destination Moon, which tracks a hypothetical trip to the moon from early stages of development to an experimental maiden voyage. The screenplay was written in part by sci-fi big cheese Robert A. Heinlein, who also served as technical advisor. It's more of a drama than some other speculative, let's take a trip to outer space movies that would follow in its footsteps. Rather than relinquish its pseudo-realistic first act to a fantastic world of alien beings, it stays methodical and smart and includes some details that turned out to be accurate once we finally did make it to the moon almost 2 decades later. The Technicolor film won an Academy Award for its special effects, and it has some beautiful visuals, including a striking panorama of the lunar surface, featuring matte paintings by Chesley Bonestell, and a tense spacewalk sequence where I believe animation was used for long-distance shots. Speaking of animation, the film includes a Woody Woodpecker cartoon, which does make sense in context. It's one of the lighter moments in a film that features quite a lot of peril. It was produced by George Pal, who also made The War of the Worlds, and Leith Stevens wrote a great score that captures and enhances the atmosphere and the tone. I especially liked the music in the descent and arrival sequences. Often in discussions of Destination Moon, the somewhat similar film Rocket Ship XM is mentioned. Destination Moon was a highly publicized project with a lengthy production period. It got delayed, and when that happened, the competitive Rocket Ship XM was slapped together with a pretty modest budget on a very short time frame, and it was rushed to theaters, beating Destination Moon by a very short margin in an attempt to capitalize on its press and steal some of its thunder. You might remember I talked about Rocket Ship XM earlier this year. I found it entertaining enough, but without question, I liked Destination Moon better. Movie number 5 is Trafic, Jacques Tati's 1971 film in which a French car manufacturer is trying to get a new camping car to an auto exhibition in Amsterdam. Monsieur Hulot, as the car's designer, is along for the ride, but as one might expect, the journey doesn't go without a hitch. It is a pleasant comedy where the humor is subtle, derived mainly from the presentation of images that are just slightly absurd or that we recognize from real life with a chuckle. And as in his other films, Tati likes the whimsy of repetition, be it repeated actions or visuals echoing each other. In the past year or so, I've gone through the Jacques Tati, Monsieur Hulot films. You can find my comments on Monsieur Hulot's Holiday, Mon Oncle, and Playtime elsewhere on this channel. By this point, I had a good idea what to expect from a Tati film, and therefore I was able to settle into the pace from the get-go, because these movies are not like other comedies. I do still think that the first one I saw, Monsieur Hulot's Holiday, was the funniest. That's the only one that really made me just explode with laughter. But this one has a nice consistency, and no noticeable slow spots. That said, there isn't one part that sticks out as the highlight for me, like the garden party in Mon Oncle or the new restaurant dinner service in Playtime. The camping car, though, what a great fixture. It's like Tati envisioned tiny homes on wheels and hashtag van life long before such things were invented. It's such a cool design, but of course it's just a teeny bit impractical, because after all, it is a car designed by Monsieur Hulot. Movie number 6 is another rewatch, and this one I've talked about before, 2014's Interstellar. To make contact with scientists who are sent on a mission to find a habitable place for the human race to colonize, a team travels to outer space and goes through a black hole. This being a Christopher Nolan film, of course, he and his brother Jonathan find a way to make it complicated and confusing. I've heard a lot of hate for this movie over the years, and according to some Nolan fanboys, this is his worst movie. I never set out to be a contrarian, but while I don't think it's a perfect film, and I couldn't possibly explain the whys and wherefores of certain elements of the plot, I think I like it the most of his films that I've seen. That's probably because it's more emotional, having to do with matters of love, family, sacrifice, regret, etc. Bewildering twists of time and space are there, but whereas I typically find Nolan's films have a coldness about them, with the exception of a key scene or two, that keeps me from feeling truly engaged with the characters and their predicament, that's not the case here. There are several scenes I find moving. Everyone in the cast pulls their weight, and while I eventually gave up trying to figure out Nolan's rhyme or reason regarding the changing aspect ratio, the visuals are stunning. More and more, I enjoy Hans Zimmer's score, especially the meme-famous No Time for Caution and Stay. Do you say it's Stay or S-T-A-Y? Anyway, it's one of my favorites. I've heard some cool covers, like an Interstellar suite for organ, that increased my appreciation for it as its own composition and as music complementing the action. I still think the robot design is very nifty, although my mom, of all people, observed that in appearance and in movement, it seemed like a Minecraft character. Wow, Mom. My biggest complaint, and I've said this about other Nolan films, and I'm finally hearing other people gripe about it in his work, is that the sound mixing is so unbalanced. Music, explosions, gunfire, loud things like that are just overpowering, while dialogue is too low or too soft to make out, especially when there's crucial information being conveyed. It's really annoying to be constantly turning the volume up and then, oh man, we gotta turn it down. And also, I kind of feel like, okay, Christopher Nolan, you're a really smart guy, you know what you're doing, very successful filmmaker, what's the deal? Are you doing this on purpose? Are you trying to confuse people by, explaining things so that you explain things so that there's no plot hole, but then you cover up the explanation so that people are confused and they have no idea what's going on. Everybody's like, oh, Christopher Nolan is just such a genius. He makes me feel so dumb because I can't figure out his stuff. I don't know. Is that what's going on here? Anyway, I'm sticking to my position that I like this movie. The scene where Matthew McConaughey watches the video messages from home that have accumulated while they were out of communication. Ugh, what a roller coaster. The acting is great there, and it's heartbreaking stuff. That's what makes the film meaningful to me, not the visuals or the message or the mind-bending stuff. It's those deep, personal, emotional moments. Movie number 7 is Failsafe. Not the 1964 film, which I have seen, but the TV version that was broadcast live on April 9th, 2000, the first time something like that had been done in decades. Set in the Cold War, tensions escalate when a US plane is mistakenly ordered to nuke the Soviet Union. I wanted to see this mainly out of curiosity, and I think the result is surprisingly smooth. No doubt there were extensive rehearsals for the cast and crew to work all the kinks out. I'm not so familiar with the 64 film that I could compare the two sets of actors, but this impressive collection of top-notch professionals and familiar faces did well. It's tough to say who the standouts were, as everyone was good. Because of the style of the broadcast and the black and white, it does look a little strange, but you do get used to that. And there's very little awkwardness about the production. Only a few half-flubbed words here, some white noise or a mic pop there. And I kind of liked that it included those flaws. This was like watching a filmed play with extra large sets to accommodate multiple cameras, so I didn't mind mistakes, and those made it feel more real, with a tense premise like fail-safes, where the scenario it presents is meant to be horrifying. Real is good. The more real it feels, the more effective the ending. I'm just bummed I didn't know about this back in 2000, then we could have watched it live. Movie number 8 is an unexpected rewatch of 2016's Star Trek Beyond. Unexpected because it happened to come on TV, and I happened to be watching TV, which is a rare occurrence, and I ended up watching the whole thing. Probably a lot of my comments here are going to be similar to what I said about the movie the first time I talked about it. I don't know, I don't remember, and I'm not going to go back and check. It's not a masterpiece, certainly not on par with any of the old Star Trek movies, and not as fun as the 2009 movie. But at least it's better than Into Darkness. Ugh. It's got two big issues for me. One is a plot that's too complicated and never succeeds in making me care much about who's who and why they're doing what they're doing. The other problem is the action sequences. Basically, they're terrible. Editing and effects-wise, the action scenes here are just an ugly mess. However, I still contend that these actors were ingeniously cast as the featured crew of the Enterprise, and by this point, their third film together, they were settled into their roles and relationships. The amount of hand-to-hand combat certain people engage in is ridiculous, but there are many good character moments. For those who like the Spock-McCoy dynamic, there's plenty of that, and Chris Pine's Kirk really comes into his own as a captain here, I think, whereas in the preceding films, he felt awfully young. There are some touching moments as well. I admit they got me with the Star Trek VI cast photo, and I really do like Michael Giacchino's music for these movies. Enterprising Young Men from the first one has a firm place on my soundtrack playlist. Movie number 9 is 1958's Blood of the Vampire. Set in the middle of the 19th century, a doctor falsely convicted of murder is sent to a creepy asylum for the criminally insane, where a deranged scientist uses the inmates as guinea pigs in his secret experiments, aided by a deformed, hunchbacked, mute assistant. This is the most Hammer horror-esque movie I've ever seen that isn't actually Hammer horror. It was written by Jimmy Sangster, who penned a lot of Hammer's scripts. It features Barbara Shelley, frequent Hammer co-star, as the leading lady, and as you may have noticed, you could use this movie to play gothic cliché bingo. That actually makes it fun, rather than trite and predictable, provided you're into this kind of thing. It has some interesting stuff, and is more a combination of vampire and Frankenstein-type stories, despite the title. All of that said, I didn't particularly like the movie, but I recognize it as a different twist on some standard gothic horror fare, and it's got awesome spooky font in the opening titles as well. Movie number 10 is 2012's Into the White, a war film based on a true story in which a German plane and a British plane involved in a skirmish over the mountains of Norway shoot each other down. Struggling against snow, wind, and freezing temperatures with no supply of food or water, the 3 Germans and 2 Brits find themselves seeking shelter together at a cabin where they must choose between remaining enemies or making a truce. This is a good one, equal parts war film and survival film. It took me a little while to warm to the performances. Rupert Grint is the only cast member I was familiar with, and I don't think much of him as an actor, but he ended up being not bad. Everybody settled in, and it was fine. This is actually a Norwegian film with a good amount of German spoken, but eventually most of the dialogue is in English. Most importantly, it's a good story, loosely based on real events. The film may also be known as Comrade, Cross of Honor, or Lost in the Snow. Movie number 11 is 1947's Dear Ruth. I would classify this as a domestic wartime comedy. It's set in 1944. William Holden plays a bombardier on 2 days' leave who shows up at a house all excited to meet Ruth, the girl with whom he's been exchanging letters, only the person who's actually been writing to him is Ruth's well-meaning younger sister. This is quite a fun movie with some clever dialogue and a cozy familial feel. The leads are alright. Holden's character is a nice guy, not particularly interesting until the third act, and Joan Caulfield is adequate without making too much of an impression. It's the supporting players in this case who steal the show, particularly Edward Arnold as the father. I loved his character and his performance, and he and Mary Phillips as the mother were so good together. Even the little sister, played by young Mona Freeman, got some good laughs. She's kind of a twit, but at least her heart's in the right place, and the way the family just gelled together was great. I really enjoyed this one. Movie number 12 is 1953's Mantrap, also known as Man in Hiding. It's a British mystery where Paul Henreid plays a former intelligence agent who agrees to track down a convicted murderer who's escaped from prison. Questions abound over whether or not he was truly guilty and what he's going to do on the lam. I happened upon this movie years ago on YouTube while I was looking up Now Voyager fan videos, but before I could watch the whole thing, it disappeared. Ever since, I've tried to remember the title and find it again, and finally, I came across an upload. The quality's not great, but it's sufficient. It's a decent little mystery, in part a thriller, because the fugitive's wife, played by Lois Maxwell, is terrified he's going to come after her. This one is a Hammer film, directed by Terence Fisher. I think it could have been a trifle longer and explained a few things more thoroughly, but Paul Henreid's a delight as usual. This is near the tail end of his career as a leading man, but in my opinion, he's still dreamy. Movie number 13 is 1979's The Black Hole. I can't believe I ended up choosing two movies that had to do with black holes. The crew of a research mission encounters a ship long given up for lost, hovering just on the edge of a black hole. Assuming the ship is an empty derelict, they're surprised to find it occupied by one man and his multi-level robotic support system. I had never heard of this Disney movie until earlier this year when it kept coming up in relation to Star Trek the Motion Picture, so I decided to check it out. It's okay. The score by John Barry is great. There's even an overture, although that's strange in a movie that's only 98 minutes long. The music's too loud in some places. It really overpowers whatever else is going on. I liked Roddy McDowall as the voice of Vincent, the sassy, philosophy-spouting droid, and the various robotic creations inhabiting the spaceship are very spooky, especially the cloaked medieval ones with mirrored faceplates. There are some fantastic, sinister visuals here. But I've got to say, I didn't think it was a particularly good film. The dialogue is sometimes stilted and awkward. The cast features some famous veterans, Maximilian Schell, Ernest Borgnine, Anthony Perkins, Yvette Mimieux, but they struggle to make some of their lines sound natural. Schell's performance seems particularly hammy, and I'm not sure it was intentional. In addition, characterizations and plot twists are predictable, and while some of the effects are nice, others look dated or cheap, even by 79 standards. I think it performs best when it's at its creepiest, and eerie visuals and music get to take center stage. But what the heck is with the ending? My mom liked the movie for the most part, and even she felt the ending was weird and over the top. I'm not looking for anyone to explain it. I think I understood. I just didn't like it. Movie number 14 is 2021's Cry Macho. Clint Eastwood, who also directed, plays a faded cowboy and rodeo star who's guilt-tripped by his ex-boss, Dwight Yoakam, into driving to Mexico to bring back his estranged 13-year-old son. When Eastwood gets there, he finds the boy and his rooster, Macho, are in trouble, and together they must evade both the police and his mother's goons. It's speculated that this may turn out to be Eastwood's final film. If that's how things turn out, I think it's a nice, bittersweet note to end on. It's a bit slow in spots, and it's a predictable story in a way with the old man and the delinquent youth learning to get along, but I liked it. Wisely, any action here is kept to a minimum, since nobody would buy Eastwood as an action hero at this point. It was startling and a little sad to see just how much older one of our last classic film icons has gotten. He moves gingerly, he talks slow, and his voice is pitched higher now. You know what, though? He's still himself. He's still got his spark and that gritty cowboy sass. The movie's got some humorous parts and even a little romance, and I loved all the funny stuff with the chicken. Critics weren't too kind, of course they weren't, but who cares? It's not great, it's a quiet little film, but I enjoyed it. And movie number 15 is 1998's Deep Rising. Treat Williams stars in this movie about a team of hijackers who storm aboard a cruise ship sitting dead in the water, only to find that all the passengers and crew have apparently disappeared. It's not long before they realize there's something else on board, something not human. This premise may sound awfully familiar to you. It's familiar to me because this movie has more than a few things in common with another movie I happened to watch just a few months ago, Virus. Now, for some reason, I was thinking that Virus came out in 93 or 94, so I assumed Deep Rising must be kind of a ripoff of Virus. But that is incorrect. Virus came out in 1999, a year after Deep Rising. So either the boot's on the other foot, or they're both just ripoffs of something else. And there are so many other things that both movies remind me of that you could take your pick. This was written and directed by Stephen Sommers, and it's a ridiculous, giant, nasty tentacle monster movie. The special effects are okay, very late 90s. It's got bombastic kills, cheesy action, corny one-liners. It's that kind of movie. It's also the kind where none of the characters are likable. The bad guys are all jerks, and then they end up doing dumb things that make you hate them even more. At least the good guys kind of grow on you, eventually. One thing that's not plot-related that Virus and Deep Rising have in common is that Cliff Curtis is in both of them. And I just wonder, what did he think when he read the script? Was he like, didn't I just do this movie? Except he would say it in a New Zealand accent. There's lots of creature violence, but for the most part the gore is so fake and exaggerated that, for me, it just wasn't that remarkable. Except for that one scene where they went all out with makeup and prosthetics. That was... wow, that was really something. So yeah, this is kind of a bad movie, but there's a time and a place for this kind of thing. If you're in the mood for a bombastic and gross late 90s sci-fi action movie with extra cheese that's gonna make you roll your eyes a lot, here you go. And that's the note we're gonna end on. I actually thought that I'd get to squeeze in one more movie and we could end on something a little more highbrow, but that's not the way the cookie crumbled. And that's okay, 15 movies is more than enough. I hope you enjoyed this month's selection. Let me know your thoughts on any of the movies that you may have seen in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.